Hey everyone, my name is Toma Tom here on YouTube, and this channel is all about landscape and travel photography. The topic from today is minimalist photography, and I'll share with you tips and ideas and discuss different aspects of minimalist photography, but I will do so with or through examples. I think this is the best way to transmit information in photography. Minimalist photography can be considered a photo that has a minimal number of elements in it. We can talk about color or subject, composition elements, patterns, textures. Everything is minimal. There are very few elements in a minimalist photo, and that is the purpose, to pick one subject and only one subject, and to put it in front of the viewer by using all that negative space and only few lines of composition, or in some occasions no lines of composition. So let's move to those examples and talk about some tips related to minimalist photography. Many of my minimalist photos are done during winter. I will also show you examples that are not during winter time, but let's start with this photo that as you can see has a lot of negative space represented by the snow, and these fences and let's say the tree and the house. It has a graphical feel to it, the image. This next one, for example, I have only two haystacks over here, and I used a very thin edge of the snow to kind of imply a direction, kind of like directing the viewer towards the two haystacks. I could have also framed the haystacks without this and just use a square composition, but I thought that this would add something and make the photo a lot more interesting. This one over here, I have a simple person that walks in the snow, and I have these fences. Again, only some fences and the two shacks over here. The thing that makes these photos interesting is the lack of clutter. If all this would have been grass, maybe the photo would look good, especially during sunrise, for example. But during winter, when everything is covered in white, and then we also have a simple sky, it's kind of like these elements are seen better. You have a deeper connection with these elements, because your eye, it's not wandering around looking at all sorts of other elements. This one over here, for example, it's a small house or small shack, whatever, and I used the negative space of the sky. I really like the clouds, and I purposely kept this area underexposed. I didn't want to bring more details, and the reason for that is because there is a lot of grass, a lot of dirt. There is not in this area of the photo, there are not elements that would make the photo more interesting. And the fact that you can realize what the elements are just by looking at their silhouettes made me choose this underexposure feeling in the lower part of the image. Over here I did a long exposure, and it's basically a very simple photo. It's a field of wheat, and the wind was going through it, and that was it. Again, in the same location, only that now I chose to make the road the focal point, and because these two areas are the same, that is the reason for which you can place the road right in the middle. You have kind of like a symmetry from left to right. Of course, there are some elements over here that break the symmetry, but I think they're not that big, they're not that imposing. And I also went for a long exposure over here. It blurred some of the elements over here, and it made the photo look a lot better and a lot simple. This one over here, it's kind of like on the edge, in my opinion, from a minimalist landscape photo to a normal landscape photo. There are lots of elements, for example, in this area, but I think you can also look at it as minimalist photography, even if you have a considerable number of elements over here. This one, I used all this emptiness as a negative space. Usually when I'm using negative space, I try to convey the size of the object. It's a little bit strange, because when you want to convey the size and proportions, you need an element to compare to, but sometimes showing a vast negative space can also give you a feel of the actual subject. In this case, I think you realize how big this rock is, and also the fact that these pine trees are really high up in on the mountain. Over here was snowing really bad, but I kind of like the fence and the house over the fence. Even though the fence divides the photo in two areas, I think in this case it works. There are numerous occasions when you divide the photo with a fence and the photo doesn't work anymore, because here in the lower part, for example, you don't have any other elements, and sometimes this doesn't look okay, having all the interest elements only on one side of the photo, but in the situation of this photo, I think it works. Again, a very, very simple composition. You have the subject, and it's placed in the middle, again, because of the symmetry of left and right. I like the clouds and just a little bit of grass under the subject. A small house in the mountains, up in the mountains, and the snow falling on it. I would have loved to have a lot more fog, but even in a situation like this, I think this image can be considered a minimalist photo. With some more fog, it would have worked better, but either way, I think the photo is okay. For example, this is another photo that could be considered minimalist photography, but in my personal opinion, it is and it's not. I mean, it can be considered minimalist photo simply because you have just two elements, the ground and the sky. In this case, it's a little bit better because there is this ridge of the hill in light and the lower part is in shadow, and this way you kind of like have a point of interest over here. But in my personal opinion, you should have a lot more than just a separation between darkness and light. Over here in the light, I mean, if there would have been a tree or something, or I don't know, a tractor going on the field or whatever, if there would have been an element somewhere in this area, then the photo would qualify to be something more. I mean, looking like this, it's more like a Windows wallpaper. It's not something that I could say that it's a great photo. It's just a simple representation of a landscape. In this photo, I think that I made this photo in Tuscany, and this tower is really big, but because of how I frame it and the clouds, and you have a feeling that this is really small in comparing it with the rest of nature, if you want. So yeah, sometimes I think minimalist photography can convey that, and this is one of the cases when you get the feeling of how small things are when compared to the rest of Mother Nature. This is one of the photos that I really like. This is one of those cases when having all that green, it's not bad, simply because it's a field that it's taken care of. So whenever our brain sees order, our brain likes what we see. So the fact that this field is taken care of, it's a lovely green, and you also get in these clouds kind of like a similar representation of what is happening here, something like a flat, and then the house with some cypress trees. It's kind of like over here you have a flat area, and then you have a bump over here that could represent the house and some other points. So it's like the clouds are kind of like mirroring what's underneath. This was a really foggy day. By the way, this was the first sunrise session of one of my Tuscany workshops. It was one of the most spectacular workshops in terms of weather conditions, and the composition is simple, and you can see it. I have a focal point, a tree, and then a line that helps the tree have a kind of like importance. It has the tree has a good foundation to sit on visually, and then the landscape kind of it's lost in the fog. It's the same location, only that I've included another tree. It's not always a good thing to have two elements that attract the eye. I left the photo looking like this just to point out this, that in this situation there are two elements that are competing for your attention. You usually have to have only one. So in order to make this photo look better, I think I would have made this tree a little more undefined, unclear, and then add more clarity and contrast to this one over here. This is a photo that, again, is on the border from minimalist photography and normal landscape photography because of all these other elements. But if you look of all the other elements as negative space, then you can see it as minimalist photography, where the subject is this large tree over here. I really liked how this tree looked with the orange and red leaves of autumn, and this pine tree that was sitting in front of it in a way made the composition more interesting. It looks like an aura of this pine tree. And again, this small shack, it looks really beautiful with, and the colors are the color scheme of the image. It's very minimalist if you want. So you have the redness of the sunrise, the grass, it's kind of like a yellow orange, and then the hay from the house catches the light of the sunrise. There you have it. That was the topic from today, tips related to minimalist photography. I hope you like it. And if you have something to ask or something to add, just use the comment section below. And until next time, keep on photographing, because it's the only way that you can get better. Bye bye.